independent advice. I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the amendment be disagreed to. I give the call to the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to make my contribution to the Infrastructure Australia Amendment Independent Review Bill 2023. Infrastructure Australia was established under the previous Labor government by the now Prime Minister to provide independent expert advice to government on infrastructure priorities. The premise was simple. Government spending on infrastructure should create jobs, build up our communities, whether they be in regional, rural or metropolitan areas, and there should be a boost to economic growth. Infrastructure Australia was meant to help the government make important decisions to deliver on those principles. Under the former Labor government, we listened and invested in every one of Infrastructure Australia's priority projects. However, Deputy Speaker, over the last 9 years under the former government, we saw rorts waste in every portfolio, and that was the same for infrastructure, where there is an extensive list of scandals, one of which was in my community of southwest Sydney. That was the Leppington Triangle. A report of the ANAO found that the Infrastructure Department spent almost 10 times more than it should on a 12.26 hectare piece of land. That's almost $30 million of taxpayers' money spent on a piece of land which was valued at $3 million. I can only imagine what could be done better with that money. In 2021, the ANAO released a report on the car park rort scandal and found that none of the 47 car park projects were selected by the Infrastructure Department and none were merit-based. These examples speak of culture cultivated by a previous government of spending taxpayer money without proper scrutiny or process. And it was that culture which found its way into Infrastructure Australia, undermining its independence. On multiple occasions, the body was subject to the partisan stacking of its board. The Albanese government committed to an independent review of Infrastructure Australia, and that's what we delivered. On the 22nd of July 2022, our government appointed Nicole Lockwood and Mike Murdoch, AO, to commence that review, and on the 8th of December 2022 it was released along with the government's response. The bill before the House today will implement part of that response. This bill changes the governance structure of the Infrastructure Australia, which is more streamlined, replacing the board with 3 expert commissioners that will be supported by an advisory council. The 3 commissioner positions will be hired through a merit-based selection process that is publicly advertised, ensuring Infrastructure Australia is led by the best possible people. The body will also be required to develop a nationally consistent framework for evaluating infrastructure proposals that will reduce duplication with the states and territories to ensure that it can work with all levels of government efficiently. In addition, this bill will require that Infrastructure Australia's priority list is smaller and more targeted, so it can focus on nationally significant infrastructure. Importantly, a new object will be added to the Act that identifies Infrastructure Australia's mandate as the Commonwealth Government's independent advisor on infrastructure investment planning and project prioritisation. This new object will ensure both the independence of the body and the quality of its advice. Infrastructure Australia functions and its project suite will be more focused and include developing a smaller, more target infrastructure priority lists than those priorities nationally significant infrastructure proposals for consideration by the Australian Government. The bill will help reduce duplications between Commonwealth and state territories by requiring Infrastructure Australia to develop nationally consistent framework for evaluating projects and proposals and endorse project proposals by state and territory governments. Infrastructure Australia will be governed by 3 commissioners, including a chair commissioner and a chief executive officer. The commissioners will be the accountable authority and appointed by the responsible minister based on expertise, skills, experience, knowledge, with a gender and geographical representations considered. The CEO will be appointed by the commissioners. The new governance model will ensure that Infrastructure Australia has the eminence, authority and standing as a national leader and coordinator among infrastructure advisory bodies. Alongside this bill, an updated statement of expectations will be issued to implement the recommendations of the review. The government's amendments to Infrastructure Australia Act will ensure that Infrastructure Australia can operate under the strategic direction of its commissioners to provide impartial advice to the government on the prioritisation of need for projects around the country. While Infrastructure Australia must have regard to the government's policies and objectives, it is the commissioners who will be responsible for determining the content of the Infrastructure Australia's project and advice. Infrastructure Australia was established by a Labor government, and clearly it's a Labor government that will strengthen it further. This bill goes towards ensuring that Australia's infrastructure projects are built based on need, where they will have the best economic benefits for the economy and where they will have jobs for our future. I thank the Minister for Infrastructure for her work in ensuring that Infrastructure Australia can continue to inform the government on nation-building infrastructure we need, and I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the amendment be disagreed